This video is now in session, and the Biden administration has faced their first test, or I guess one of many tests, when it comes to the infrastructure bill, and so far they have failed. So if we look at what's been happening in Washington this past week, you'll know that Nancy Pelosi attempted to bring up an infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, on the floor of the House for a vote. And progressives threatened to shoot that down because it was not being brought at the same time as the more progressive budget bill that was planned by the Biden administration. So you have the $1 trillion infrastructure bill and the $3.5 trillion budget plan. And because of that threat, Nancy Pelosi eventually took it seriously. And thus, even though the vote on infrastructure was set to begin on Monday, it was pushed back to Thursday, and then it was pushed back to Friday. And then now it's not happening at all, at least for now. Because basically what Biden has said in his talk to the Democratic caucus is that it is not quite time yet for us to introduce the budget plan. Like, details are not there quite yet, and that's something that's been a problem with with the budget bill, particularly for the past several weeks now, which is that you have a lot of legislators who are in support of some kind of progressive budget bill, but they're debating on how much to spend. Joe Manchin, before October 1st, essentially didn't really have a number to give for negotiations in the budget plan, and that meant that there was some vaguity and some inconclusiveness as to what kind of budget plan should be passed. Progressives wanted $3.5 trillion as the floor, and the moderates, they didn't really have any kind of plan. They didn't have any alternative number until yesterday, which is $1.5 trillion. So that's a pretty big gap, a gap of $2 trillion between what moderates want and what progressives want. But the good thing for Biden is now moderates actually have a number. They have a number because 2 weeks ago they were not able to come up with a number at all. So now the fact that they're able to come up with a monetary value signifies that real negotiations about what should be in that bill and what should ultimately be the final cost can begin. Because if you don't know what you stand for, then there's no reason to start negotiating. And that's what Democrats have had to grapple with for the past week, which is that moderates who are essentially still trying to figure out how much and what a bill should cost and what should be put in it they were not ready to pass a budget plan, which is why Nancy Pelosi wanted an infrastructure bill. But obviously, progressives wanted the infrastructure bill to be passed in tandem with the $3.5 trillion budget plan. It is all political BS because both of these bills, as we've stated numerous times, will eventually pass. Including the progressive budget bill. It doesn't matter which gets passed first, as long as both of them passed as soon as possible. That's the best thing that the Democrats could end up with. But moderates and progressives, particularly progressives this time around, are kind of sidelining that logic. So it's all politics, but it's yeah, but people want to give their constituents and their supporters something to talk about, and for progressives, they want to give their base something to rally around, which is that they're not going to be tousled by the Democratic establishment. They're not going to be tossed around by the Democratic establishment, and that they actually have a voice in the U.S. House, and that's really their main purpose. Because before this kind of thing happened, in Biden's 117th Congress, we saw the progressives concede a lot of things to Joe Manchin, Senator Manchin of West Virginia, and Senator Kirsten Sinema of Arizona. So that's why things have been able to pass. But now progressives are kind of reopening the divisions that we saw in 2018, divisions between moderates and progressives. Meanwhile, the establishment has to somehow hold it all together. And so far, they're doing they're doing subpar, because we can look through recent polling at Biden's approval rating. It's been going down and down. If you compare this to Donald Trump's approval rating, if we do net approval, you can see that it's constantly going down. And the reason why is because not only of Afghanistan from a month ago at this point, but rather it's also about the lack of action that's happening in Congress. It is deja vu from 2010, because in 2010 we saw the same thing with healthcare, with the Affordable Care Act, which is that Nancy Pelosi wanted to get it passed, but it was stalled in Congress. And other important things like financial reforms were essentially ignored for that, that time. And as a result, you had people people who were angry at Congress for not doing anything, and you had general frustration that led to the Tea movement and that kind of the Tea Party movement, and that kind of thing it can happen right now. We're obviously in a much more divisive nation, but there is a possibility for the opposition to rally around the lack of action in Congress and to have a red wave in 2022. We initially said during this period that Joe Biden had a sliver of a chance of taking over the House, retaining the House in 2022. Now that chance is kind of gone because of things like redistricting, and as well as his popularity and the Democrats' popularity, because these two things of approvals for Joe Biden and Democrats are not related, or at least they're not directly tied to each other. But because a lot of this issue surrounding the infrastructure bill and the budget plan is instigated by Democratic members of Congress, we will definitely see Democrats fare worse in the generic polling as we come closer to the 2022 elections. And there's also the 2021 election. That is something that has to be grappled with, because in Virginia there will be a competitive election. And right now the polls are pretty close between Terry McAuliffe and as well as Glenn Youngkin. And if we look at 538, I'm not sure if they have a poll tracker yet for Virginia, but yeah, they do. But you can see here that McAuliffe is really only leading by 3%. That's and it's sometimes within the margins of error. You can see in this Fox News poll, McAuliffe is up by 4%, but we still have 1 month left to the election, and we'll have to see if this bill, if the stalling in the Democratic Congress is going to affect this race, especially since McAuliffe doesn't have a majority of the vote share, because he has only 47.3% of voters who would vote for him, not above 50%. So that gives Youngkin an ability to actually go over McAuliffe. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.